Welcome to the Paper Trail, where we follow the journey, my journey, through the world of a CEO of a mortgage note fund. I'm Chris 70, and after years of buying, managing, and selling notes with 70 investments, I'm here to share the real stories behind the deals. What went right, what went wrong, and what I wish I knew earlier. From non-performing loans to seller financing to private lending, this show is about more than strategies, about growing your business, learning to follow the paper trail, and doing the due diligence that separates the pros from the rest. Now, let's hit the trail running. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Paper Trail Podcast. I am your host, Chris 70, and today we are going to share some note stories. Since I rebranded the podcast to the Paper Trail, I wanted to get back into providing investors case studies, feedback, information, roll up the sleeves, and get back to the basics. Back when, years ago, I started the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast, for those going way back in time. And just made me think about how that podcast started. And for those that don't know, first few notes that I got involved in, myself and Gail Greenberg, who was another note investor, working a W-2 job. And when I would leave the office every day, it's always people you would call and stuff. And I started calling Gail, and we both just started sharing our war stories. And we came to the conclusion of, these stories were good entertainment, good education. And we're like, we got to record this somehow. So we started recording the podcast in webinars. And I remember our audio was awful. Our video was awful. Gail had her dogs barking in the background, which I know drove some people nuts as well. But if you go back and listen to our original podcast, I was awful at it. Gail will probably admit that she could have improved as well, but she did much better than me. And here I am today. Got my morning coffee with me. But still, things can be improved upon. And I just go back in time and share that because 7+ years, a lot has changed, a lot can happen, but that's still a really short period of time. So for people also just getting started in the space, realize it takes time. The note business is slow in regards to working things out, and takes time and patience. So that's what I want to really talk about today is what we're seeing today, where trying to use time to your advantage, as well as also still being patient. And I want to share, at least two situations, see how much time this takes, of some loans we bought. And we bought, a pool of, 20 or 30 loans. And some of those were investor loans where there was one borrower who had multiple properties. And the borrower was, like a month behind. The loans were maturing. And when we got the loans boarded, we're relying on the servicer. But we've started to see a little bit more of us needing to get involved. And especially on some of these loans that are investor related versus owner occupied. Because on the owner occupied loans, you really want to be careful speaking with borrowers because most people don't know what you can and can't say. For example, if the borrower is, call it the wife, and she's the only one on the loan, and you pick up the phone and call, and the person's like, yeah, I'm her husband, just tell me and I'll relay the message. You can't. You can't talk to them about the loan information or anything because they're not the borrower. Unless you have specific written permission or verbal permission at that time, you can't talk to them. A lot of people don't know that. But on the investor side, it's different where, yes, you can have those conversations and typically don't have to deal with a lot of consumer law protections, that are out there. Still need to follow the laws, of course. So with this borrower, the borrower wanted an extension because they wanted to sell the properties. And we gave the borrower an extension for a nominal fee and also told them that they needed to keep the loan current. The borrower had we'll call it 5 properties. 3 of them were rented, 2 of them were vacant. And they're trying to sell them. And we worked out an extension with the borrower, contingent upon them still paying and kind of hinting that, hey, look, you got to lower the price on these. You've had them listed for 8 months and you drop them $500. That's really not moving the needle. And you're at a point now where the interest, if it goes in default, will accrue and chew up any equity that you have in those. And unfortunately, a lot of real estate investors have egos that they think, oh, I'll get myself out of this and I'm still going to make money, without understanding the downside risk. And in this instance, the downside risk is, that equity gets chewed up fast, then all of a sudden they're underwater. Would they have to potentially be cutting me a check? Now, is it worth it from a monetary standpoint, but also from a mental standpoint, trying to deal with all of the issues that this person had because they had other things going on? So we end up actually getting in contact with the borrower, and also we're trying to see if we could potentially refinance them into a different type of loan program to lower their payments. Unfortunately, the borrower just didn't qualify. And the borrower was able to get a few of the properties under agreement, but the remainder, we had sent the demand letter to the borrower. And one thing we see consistently is borrowers will procrastinate to the last second, and then they blow up your phone. So in this instance, we are communicative ahead of time with the borrower, and we're just telling them, hey, look, the moment the demand expires, we're going to give you 2 options. You either give us a deed in lieu on the properties, and we will just walk away. You don't owe us anything. Your debt's resolved. Or if you want to continue selling them, that's a business decision by you. But just realize and understand that if you do that and there's a deficiency, meaning that you don't sell them for as much, or we have to foreclose, you're still responsible for those costs. Because in our business, time is money. You control the asset by having the loan, but in this instance now, you want to just fully control the asset and take over this asset. And these are actually decent properties, 2,500 square foot properties in an area, major metropolitan area, that were $400,000 to $500,000 homes. These weren't homes that were in areas that don't see appreciation or are very challenging. This was a nice middle class area. So, the borrower notes that they agree to this. And then we draft all the paperwork. We send them the paperwork. They come back with a few comments, which we adjust. And the day before the deadline, they're like, oh, I think I have these sold for cash. Can you send me the payoffs? And we're like, sure, here are the payoffs. But again, we just want to reiterate, if this paperwork's not signed tomorrow, the deal is off. We're foreclosing, and you're going to be potentially stuck with the bill because several months have passed and the payoffs now are probably pretty close. Well, definitely in a foreclosure sale. I mean, there's still equity in the properties by about 10%, which would get eaten up in, if he sold them anyways, realtor fees and closing fees, or at a foreclosure sale. Finally gave him the ultimatum and stayed on him. And this is the difference between getting a little bit more involved and the servicer. Because the servicer, and no, this isn't to knock a servicer. Servicer reps are managing probably 300 loans. So you send them something, it might take them a few days. They're not at your beck and call. You're not their only client. And when you're trying to get things done in an expedited manner, sometimes you got to step in. And in this instance, because it's some valuable property that we're chasing. It's over $1 million worth of property. We want to step in. Now, if this was a $100,000 property, we would probably let the servicer take care of it. So we focus on some of those bigger assets. But the point I'm trying to make is there comes certain times where if you need to be a little bit more forceful, you may need to step in and give that ultimatum. And in this instance, we did, and I believe this would have probably dwindled on for another few months if we didn't, myself and Larissa, take that initiative. So that's story one. Story two, very similar, but these were non-performing loans, very similar situation, handful of properties. And this one was a builder in an area where we also have contractors and a builder who has these properties 90% complete. And when I say 90% complete, the house is pretty much done. It needs landscaping, driveway, and final touch, paint up and touch up and punch list work in the house, cabinets, countertops. And literally it's like driveway, landscaping. And so you're probably 10 to 15,000 per property. But when you multiply that by 4, borrower's in default. Borrower's got about 30 other properties that they're trying to figure out what to do with. Borrower asked for an extension. Again, first time we gave it to him, but then the borrower, again, didn't make the payments. So we start the foreclosure process, and borrower goes dark for a few months. And we also had our attorney try and reaching out and our servicer to no avail. So I pick up the phone, call the borrower, introduce myself, and basically, hey, look, we got to come to some resolution, and let's get on a call and let's figure out what we need to do. And at first, the borrower doesn't think like, oh, you're not willing to work with me. You won't give me an extension. You won't do this, do that. And we're like, no, we'll work with you, but at our terms. And again, it comes down to a business decision by you in regards to what you want to do. If you have the money to go finish these properties and sell them, then that's great. We get our money. You make some money on these deals because there is some money in them. And then we all walk away. But my inkling is, based off of the lack of production over the last several months, is you're a little strapped for cash. You can't finish the projects. And interest is accruing on multiple projects that you have, not only ours, because we went online and saw you got some other properties that are in legal issues. And what we're willing to do is just hand us over these properties. You walk away free and clear. Or if you don't, and you try and finish and don't, and you come underwater, you got other assets in other locations. They've got some multifamily properties that have equity. It could impact those. So what is it that you want to do? And within a span of 3 days of conversations, we were able to get a resolution, which the attorneys and the servicer were over a month involved. So there are these instances where you sometimes will need to step in. Now, there's also occasions where you attempt to step in and it just doesn't work. And I'll share another example where I have a borrower who's we're in the foreclosure process as well, and the borrower reached out to us. And not only did they reach out to us, they first reached out to our asset manager, who gave them a response that they did not like. And then this individual went to our website and picked every name off our website and emailed every single person on our website, basically asking, trying to think of a nice way to say, telling us that we need to work with them. They're very direct and very demanding, which is interesting for somebody who hasn't paid their mortgage in a year and a half while they have a renter in the property that they were living in and then moved out of. So when we got that email, we didn't respond the way the borrower thought we would. We responded, thank you for your email. The individual you originally contacted is your point of contact on this. The other people you have reached out to are not involved at all in regards to the details of this loan, and you must go back to that original point of contact, which they did. And we could not get anywhere with them because the borrower is using ChatGPT for everything. And it's very easy to tell because different font sizes, the bold, the M dashes, and what they're trying to tell us makes zero sense at all. And they are of some opinion, and I'm not sure how they're figuring this out, that like the essentially like proceeds from like the sale, they believe, even though if the property sold at foreclosure, our bid would be, we think the property will get sold at let me step back, use some rough numbers. $700,000 property, they owe us basically 650. Our bid at auction is probably going to be somewhere in the fives. Okay, so we'll get paid, we'll make money. When you look at, okay, if it bid full, take it back and then pay all the fees and holding costs, like, okay, what's the number differences? But for some reason, basically, they believe that if somebody else bids above us, so let's say somebody bids 600 and we bid 550, even though our payoff 650, they're of the opinion that that $50,000 above our bid goes to them, doesn't come to us. Is essentially what they're trying to tell us. And we tried to explain it to them, but they're just not getting it because they're using ChatGPT. So we did push this over back to our attorney and let our attorney kind of handle it and deal with them, in the sense of hoping that they get an attorney. Unfortunately, they didn't get an attorney. So they're using ChatGPT now with our attorney. And we're also now trying to pull back a little bit and limit communication because, again, it doesn't make sense for us to pay our attorney to talk to somebody, which is like talking to a wall, because they're of this ChatGPT opinion on they know all the laws of the land. This one actually is still in progress and process, and similar situation of, in this instance, now we're still trying to work something out with the borrower, but we also do have a foreclosure date coming up in the near future. And by using that foreclosure date as some leverage in regards to working something out is something I strongly recommend. Long story short, as we wrap up this episode, if the borrower is allowed to drag things out, they typically will, because they're living in a property or they're collecting money or they're not paying and they're living for free. Until they really get pushed, what incentive do they have? Many of them don't understand that the interest is accruing, and yes, they are, one way or another, they're technically paying. It's like buying something on a credit card and not having to pay it till another year. People are like, oh, I just bought this and I don't have to pay for it till a year. I mean, that's kind of how some of them think, but not understanding that, yeah, it might be another year before you have to pay, but it's going to be a lot more expensive for you because of all the other fees and costs that are associated with it. Long story short, as we wrap up this episode of the Paper Trail podcast, is if it's an important decision or something that is critical or time sensitive, you might want to talk to your servicer or attorney to see if it might be worth you reaching out as well. This isn't for every single person or every single situation. I just want to mention that what we have found sometimes, as always, and this is why we manage our assets, this is why we have our own internal investor relations team, is nobody takes care of your product better than you and your team will. Now, that's not to say that your vendors don't take care of your products. They do, and many of them do an excellent job. But if you need something done, sometimes it's best for you just to pick up the ball and get it done. So hope you enjoyed this episode of the Paper Trail podcast. As always, leave a like on your favorite listening station. And if you want more information about our investment opportunities, including our Regulation A+ offering or our 506C offerings, head over to 7einvestments.com. Thank you all for listening, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Paper Trail. I hope today's insights help you sharpen your note investing strategies. If you found value in this conversation, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow investors. I'm Chris Seveny, reminding you to keep doing the work, trust the process, and always follow the paper trail. Until next time.